Now, it is, of course, the senior service. It is the Royal Navy, without which we would not have been a great nation. We would not have been the dominant global power that we were. And in line with that, we are sending another naval vessel, HMS Richmond, down to the Gulf, down to where all the problems are at the moment. And yet, stories coming out over the weekend that we might have to mothball some of our vessels, that perhaps even the future of the Royal Marines in their active role could be threatened because we simply can't recruit enough people to join the Royal Navy. What on earth is going on? Who better to ask than Rear Admiral Chris Parry, former Royal Navy commander. Chris, help me. How, on the one hand, can we be committing the Royal Navy to more active service, whilst on the other, we might be mothballing vessels because we're short of manpower? What's going on?
Nigel, it's simply down to the fact that when you have electoral politicians, they look to the next election. They don't look far enough ahead and say, look, we've got a crisis coming down the track against totalitarian powers like Russia, China, Iran and North Korea. And we're going to need a good Navy to help the Americans secure the international seaways. And I've always said, you and I have discussed this before, Nigel, you know, the sea is the physical equivalent of the World Wide Web. And if you don't have access to that, if you can't guarantee free navigation throughout that, you ain't into globalization. Your prosperity, your trade suffers, the prices of fuel at the pumps go up. And I'm afraid to say that the conditions of service for members of the Royal Navy have deteriorated over the last 20 years. It's not just this government. Every single government has really treated life at sea as if it's just another job. And they don't make any compensation for the fact. But I can tell you now, a qualified, able seaman, leading seaman, basically is getting the same as somebody who's flipping burgers at McDonald's, and yet is expected to represent his country at international level to high standards in a really tough environment. You know, they're doing a great job there out at sea, and we treat it just like another job. I was challenged by the CEO of a leading store recently about it just being a job like any other. And I said, well, you know, your employees aren't paid, are they, to defend the knickers counter and possibly get aimed and killed at the same time. It's not just another job. And I'm afraid politicians, all of them, and I'm afraid civic society simply thinks it's just another job. It isn't. As you say, it's a leading sort of defence of our country. It's a civic duty.
Chris, very powerful words, very powerful words, and I fully understand what you're saying, and we really need a change of attitude, of culture from our politicians. Chris, I want you to stay with me for this next little item. It was announced on Friday, the death of the last SAS original. Mike Sadler, who rose in the end to become major, was part of the long-range desert group, and they were the guys with the jeeps that at night would take the SAS in to conduct the raids and then the next day try and get them out again. You can't think of a more dangerous job to do. And Mike Sadler was legendary for his skills of navigation across the desert. He was there at the first ever successful SAS raid. He was there at the side of David Sterling, the founder of the SAS, and he was something of a legend within the regiment, and he's died aged 103. He's the last of the SAS originals. And this year, we're going to have a big event on the 6th of June. It'll be the 80th anniversary of the Normandy D-Day landings. And it's kind of like we're beginning to lose the last of that generation. A different service to yours, Chris Parry, but I just thought I'd ask you for a comment on the passing of the last SAS original.
Yeah, I mean, he's typical of the sort of chap who hasn't done it for the pay. He's done it for, obviously, his country. He's done it for the sort of things that we really want people to do, things like this again now. We've got to rediscover in Generation Z duty, sacrifice, doing something other than for the money. We're not in a transactional society when we go to war. We have to make personal sacrifices, and we have to do what this guy has done. I mean, what's really interesting, Nigel, is when you're in the desert, it's like being at sea. The navigation is incredibly difficult. And I think he must have had some sixth sense as well as being able to use the stars and everything else. I mean, we've really got to take inspiration from these people and say, look, we may need these skills and these people again. As I said, in the face of a real challenge from fascist and communist regimes, we're looking at the 1930s again and the possibility of actually being in conflict with these totalitarian regimes. So he would have understood exactly what we're talking about, but we need to start reviving that attitude for today.
We do. We've got to find some more Mike Sadlers, no question. Admiral Chris Parry, thank you very much indeed.